Good evening. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for the wonderful work you do here at Cultivate. And as a teacher, it is indeed a great joy to see people like yourself really taking ideas and putting them to practice in ways that really matter, really affect people's lives. And I'm happy to say that the kind of work you're doing here is being mirrored by other places around the world and a number of places that our graduates have started analogous centers, especially in Canada. There are at least 6 centers that our graduates have started in the last few years and so forth. So that's very thrilling, and it very much fits into the theme of our evening, that about 21st century spirituality and also the role of education. I was thinking that it was 40 years ago last month that I flew in a naive, very young priest from Dubuque, Iowa, of all places. I flew to Europe, and I stopped here in Ireland first in Shannon Airport and stayed a week with the Dominicans there. And even though it was August, it was so cold and so damp, I remember they put bricks in my bed with me to warm me up, and I knew I was in a foreign country. This was going to be a new experience. And it was the beginning of my broader, deeper education, coming to Europe and meeting my mentor, Father Chanou, the wonderful French Dominican, who's really the grandfather of liberation theology, who was silenced by Pope Pius XII for 12 years, forbidden to publish, but who was brought out of the cold by the Second Vatican Council, and it was he who named the creation spiritual tradition for me. But I realized in thinking about returning here today that it's all Ireland's fault, that I got in all the trouble I've been in. Hadn't stopped here 40 years ago, life would have been different. Much less interesting, I'm sure. And I was also thinking about various stops I've had here, and 2 memories come to mind, because I think it says something about the Irish soul. The very first time I lectured in Ireland, and I think it was about 19 years ago, Ireland was in quite a depression economically at the time, very different from today, and all the young people were exiting because they couldn't get work. I remember kind of feeling this concern among the young people. And in one of my talks, altogether spontaneously, I said, well, if you young people don't feel part of the culture, you don't feel part of the economic system because you can't get work, go start your own culture. And that's what a monastery is. Go start your own monastery and develop your own economic system and your own community and your own education, and go for it. 2 years later, I returned, and lo and behold, there had been a 19-year-old in the audience who started his own monastery. And I went and visited it. It was up in a rocky place by the water, a former fort in North Ireland. And he had in his community a marvelous, diverse group. He had Northerners and Southerners. He had Protestants and Catholics, 50-year-olds and 20-year-olds. He had gays and straights, married and unmarried, kids, goats, sheep, the whole works. And I was so struck by this, that the Irish actually listen to ideas and go try them on. There's much less intellectual masturbation, I find, in Ireland than there is in most countries in Europe. That there's something about putting ideas to work and putting them into our behavior that happens when you get going in Ireland. And the only analogous experience I have is working with Native Americans. They too see ideas not as ends in themselves, but as forces for influencing and altering and shifting our behavior. So I spell this out for you because as a semi-outsider, actually I'm 50% Irish myself, but not living here, I think you should be reminded of your strength, that the intellectual life, scholarship is very important, but it's about what we do with it. It's not just about sitting around with tenure and putting out books and dusting our bookshelves. It is about truly affecting history and society, and thereby bringing spirit in and through. And one other experience that I was thinking about was about 10 years ago, I think it was. I was in Cork, and I was lecturing in Cork, and we finished around 10:15 at night. 12:30 in the morning, I'll never forget this. People were gathered in groups of 3 and 4, arguing and fighting and passionately pouring through these ideas. I was just amazed. Again, this doesn't happen anyplace else. Most people politely applause at 10 and go home to watch TV or something. But the Irish hang around for the sport of thinking together and chewing these ideas out and saying, okay, and where does this take us? So again, I just want to put this out there because these are my experiences of interacting with people on this island, and I think it's very important because really it comes down to the leadership that our species is looking for today, and certainly our Western civilization. And this leadership has to be, yes, both intellectual and activist. It has to include the heart as well as the mind. And I think the Celtic people have an amazing role to play here. Now, I thought I would begin with a little exercise together, a centering experience, and I was encouraged to try that out. I've been struck over the years in looking at different world spiritualities, and of course, that's certainly part of the 21st century scene in spirituality, is that we be thinking of the real name Catholic, the real meaning of the word Catholic. Of course, since I was last here, a lot of Catholics, Roman Catholics, have cut their apron strings with unholy Mother Church, you might say. But this kind of deconstruction is necessary for a reconstruction, and for our going much deeper into the very meaning of the word Catholic, which is not about something Roman or Scandinavian or Irish, but Catholic, of course, means universal. It is about the wisdom that is found universally in our species and through many voices, east and west, north and south. So I'd like to begin because I've been struck by how many world religions, many spiritual traditions use the vowel sound ah for the divine name. Think about it. Buddha, Krishna, Buddha, Brahman, Adonai, Yahweh, Allah, and of course, Jesus' favorite name for God, Abba. He actually pulls the ah in front and in back. So I thought we might begin with a simple centering experience using our breath. Again, something to remind ourselves that the word breath and spirit are identical in many, many languages around the world, not just the biblical languages, but in Africa, many African languages, they're the same word, breath and spirit, and in many languages around the world. So breath, when you think about it, is a lot like spirit because it's invisible, but it certainly matters. You either got it or you don't. And if you don't, you're leaving. And you're changing form profoundly. But if you've got it, well, we call that life and spirit. So let's do this chant together. Let's begin just with the sound ah, and you can be on any note you want, and we'll probably come to a common note. Then I'll throw out one of these names, and I invite you to shift to that name, and we'll be breathing and sounding these various names, and then we'll gather them into some common names. Okay? Should we try this? So I invite you to put your feet on the floor and back straight. You want to pull in as much air as you can. This is all about breath. Hildegard of Bingen said, prayer is nothing but inhaling and exhaling the one breath of the universe, which is Ruah, or spirit. So we're following in Hildegard's tradition. And of course, she, as you know, no doubt, was raised in a Celtic monastery, though she was German. Okay, these Celts get around, you know. Okay, ready? Keep the sound going. Budda, 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 Krishna, 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 Brahmin, 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 Yahweh, 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 Adonai, 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 Allah, 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 Abba, 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 Thank you. Nothing like starting an evening with group silence. You feel the silence we brought into the room. It's very beautiful. So, when we look at the world today, what do we see? I like to name the spiritual situation at this dawning of the 21st century with two questions. The first is, are we destroying the earth as we know it? Is that what our species is doing at this time? A year or so ago, I met with a very renowned scientist at Stanford University, and he said to me, well, you know, we are the first species that can choose not to go extinct. But of course, we're not so choosing. An amazing statement. I think that names the agenda for the 21st century. We are a species, the first species, that can choose not to go extinct. But the path we're on is very definitely a path of extinction. No question about it. And this is why the slogan of this center here, sustainability, is such an important and powerful spiritual word in our time. I believe that the word sustainability, is the 21st century word for justice. Because what is just holds, what is just endures, and what is unjust falls apart and does not hold. And what is sustainable is what holds, what endures. And this is the biblical teaching, where the Jews believed that the universe sat on two pillars, justice and righteousness, or internalized justice. And if justice was compromised, The whole earth was off kilter. It was not sustainable. So the Psalms say, the Jewish scriptures say, the poor and the orphan and the widow are not treated well. The whole earth is off kilter. It's not sustainable. No society is sustainable when injustice reigns. How is it possible that a species could choose to go extinct? Maybe they don't like life. Maybe they're cynical. Maybe they prefer necrophilia to biophilia, love of death to love of life. Maybe their religions are not teaching them the preciousness of life and how to recover it when it's lost, how to breathe and find spirit in something as simple as breath instead of 1,300 canon laws and 99 commandments. Maybe we've replaced morality or pseudo-morality for spirituality. Maybe it's greed. Maybe it's ignorance in the Eastern sense of ignoring what is obvious. Ignoring what is obvious. That we are part of a whole. That we are related to all the other creatures. And we ignore them at our peril. Maybe it's lack of elders. Maybe the elders are too busy making money or playing on golf courses or grabbing for power than to make themselves available to the young, vulnerable to the young, learning the new languages of the young, and assisting the young to create new forms of education, new forms of worship, new forms of celebrating, new forms of bringing together the wisdom of all the world's spiritual traditions and not just hiding in one's own tribe and say, we've got all the answers. Tribes are nice, but tribalism is killing us. Especially now that the world has shrunk. The second question I want to put forward tonight to raise, I think, the issues of 21st century spirituality is this. Are we honoring the souls of our young people? Are we honoring the souls of our young people? I was with a very wise Irish woman today, and she was telling me how sad it is that so many young people in Ireland today are committing suicide, unprecedented rates. Well, they're doing it in America too, in many ways, subtle and not subtle. Shooting each other, going to jail, doing drugs. I have a friend who was a priest on an Indian reservation in America for many years. He himself was Native American. And he told me years ago, he said, my number one job is burying kids who commit suicide at 6th grade. That'd be around 13 years of age, 12, 13. Number one job. But he does more of that than anything else. It's like the indigenous people are the canaries in the mine. That what they're going through, what they've taken into their souls of the toxic of a civilization that has lost the very concept of soul, that they were showing what the results are. The addictions that our culture is involved in and that Ireland, and obviously there's a plus to the advances that Ireland has made in employment and income and all that, but there are also many shadows that go with it. Shadows of addiction. And of course, we humans are capable of becoming addicted to anything. The more wonderful it is, the more we can get addicted. And this is why all spiritual practices have something to do with learning to let go. Learning to let go. Learning to find one's center and not be taken over by the possibilities of addiction. And so I do want to talk this evening about education and about how we're reaching our young and not, and how we might do a much better job of it. Because I don't think there's such a thing as spirituality, real spirituality, that is not inspiring the young. I think it's one of the tests of authentic spirituality. And indeed, that is not inviting the young in their way to lead. To lead. And Jesus said something like that, didn't he? Something about how children know more about the presence of the kingdom and queendom of God than adults do. Is education today part of the solution or part of the problem world over? The Dalai Lama says education is in crisis the world over today. I find that very comforting, actually. It's not just a California problem where I see it daily, and not just an American problem. It's an Irish problem. It's an Australian problem. It's a Chinese problem. It's an African problem. Because our species is in crisis, of course we've got to reinvent education. We are at a new place as a species. And we have to ask what has been left out of education. How much soul is allowed in education? And I propose that to the extent the soul is banished, to that very extent, our young people are falling into the trap of addiction and violence. And we elders have to wake up. So, how do we wake up? How do we move from this commitment of destroying the earth willy-nilly to saving it, returning it as beautiful and healthy for future generations to come? And how do we honor the young people and call this honoring education? I begin with the word awe. Awe for me is the nearest synonym we have in English for mysticism. Awe is an awakening experience. Awe is an experience of something greater than ourselves. It yanks us out, it takes us out, it yanks us out of our petty little worlds, our petty little anthropocentric worlds, into the realm of the sacred, into the realm of the sacred. And as Rabbi Heschel says, drawing on the Jewish tradition, awe is the beginning of wisdom. If awe is the beginning of wisdom, then awe is the beginning of education. Because precisely the shift we have to make in education is a shift from knowledge, which has been driving Western education for 300 years, to wisdom, which has been practically banished the last 300 years. Ernest Becker, whose Pulitzer Prize book on denial of death he received after he died. By the way, when I met up with someone who knew him, and he wrote that book at the University of Vancouver. And one night he gave a talk about the book. When he had finished it, 4 people showed up. 4 people showed up, and then after he died, he won the Pulitzer Prize for it. So that should be encouragement to every artist in this room. That means everybody. You got to follow your conscience and your integrity. And they may not show up in this generation, but the audience may show up in another generation. But Ernest Becker says, ancient man, unlike modern man, had not yet lost his awe of nature and of being. Ancient people, unlike modern people, had not yet lost their awe of nature and being. Notice how primal this is. Have we lost it? Is it present in our education? Is it present in our worship? Is it present in our art? in our movies, in our politics? Where is the room for awe? And notice, he gets right to the point. The basic awe in the human is an awe of nature and being. The awe of being. Now, given today's creation story from science, that we all have a 14 billion year history, and that it's been a tortuous but amazing journey, that itself is enough to trigger awe like never before. The new creation story is utterly awesome. But has it yet permeated religion or permeated education and thereby permeated the other professions in our civilization? No. The awe of being, the awe of existence itself. Let's go back to nature. There's a wonderful sentence by the playwright Artaud, I forget his name, Artaud, something like that, French playwright, who says that from time to time, he says, cataclysms occur that force us to return to life. The cataclysm that's occurring today in terms of global warming, in terms of the disappearance of the species, 1 out of 4 mammals on this planet are currently going extinct. The disappearance of the rainforest and so forth, all this can be a profound learning and awakening experience for us as a species. This is not an Irish problem or a Western problem or an Eastern problem. It's a species issue, our survival, our relationship to the rest of creation, which feeds us awe on a daily basis. If we're not autistic, as Thomas Berry says, he says in the 20th century, humans became autistic. We became cut off from the communication of the other species. We had so much our agenda of progress and industrialization and post-industrialization going that we couldn't hear anymore the voices, the awesome voices of the other beings, which in themselves are awesome. The whale, 56 million years longer it's been on this planet than we have. It's talking to us. All the beauty of the world talks to us. That wonderful line from Baudelaire, French art critic of the 19th century, who says, we walk through forests, not one forest, forests, plural, of physical things that are also spiritual things that look on us with affectionate looks. That's where the awe is coming from. It's coming from nature. But are we listening? Are we absorbing? Where are our hearts? How pure are our hearts? Are our hearts so committed to a different agenda than awe that we are artistically cut off? Gregory Bateson, one of the great ecological philosophers, said this once. He said, the hardest thing in the gospel is that of St. Paul addressing the Galatians when he says, God is not mocked. This saying applies to the relationship between humanity and ecology, says Bateson. Processes of ecology are not mocked. Our generation, 21st century, is taking on the burden and the price of hundreds of years of Western culture that thought it could, quote, and I'm quoting Descartes and Francis Bacon, quote, master nature. What an agenda. What a strange agenda. More than that, what a failed agenda. Nature is not mocked. And Hildegard, beginning in the 12th century, said the same thing when she said, there is a web of justice between humanity and all other creatures. And if humans break this web of justice, God allows creatures to punish humanity. Notice, she's not saying God's up in the sky punishing us, but the other creatures are going to expel us from the web of creation if we cannot find the balance. And of course, a web is not a stiff thing. A web floats, a web adjusts, a web is fastened. But nevertheless, a web is a web. And if we choose to break that web, creation itself is going to put us down and expel us. One thing that strikes me even today about our ecological blinders is that until I read this one article recently in the paper, I had never heard any broadcaster on TV or any politician or anyone else explain to me what the war in Darfur was about. But this article came out not long ago. And what it tells me is that the whole Darfur war is about water scarcity. Decades of scarce water and other resources have stoked low-intensity local conflicts that eventually led to a devastating civil war. The 4-year conflict has killed more than 200,000 people, displaced more than 2.5 million others, etc. This is quoting a geologist. Much of the unrest in Darfur and the misery is due to water shortages. There have been 2 long episodes of drought during the past 20 years, each lasting for about 7 years, and so forth. But my point is, we're fed the news about Darfur totally out of the context of ecology and nature, which is what it's all about. It's just like the immigration crisis in Southern Europe and in United States. All these politicians, I'll just talk about my country, we need a 13-foot fence all across the border with Mexico. And then someone else points out, yes, and there are such things as 14-foot ladders. But the truth is that the immigration movement from south to north that's going on in our time is essentially an ecological thing. If you've seen satellite pictures of Central America or Northern Africa taken 15 years ago, Central America, Northern Africa were essentially green. Today, these same areas, satellite pictures, they've turned brown. The fact is, we're losing arable land. That's what it's about. When people don't have arable land, they move. You would, unless you think your food comes from Piggly Wiggly or Safeway, which, of course, we've been taught to think that food comes from corporations and stores and not from the earth. That has to be green for the most part, unless you're a certain kind of desert Indian who figured out how to grow things in the desert after about 10,000 years. None of us are going to be real facile at that. So my point is that even the news we're getting today is totally out of context about the role of our relationship to nature. No wonder our kids are depressed and cynical, because they live in a culture where nature doesn't show up on the radar. It's taken for granted. I want to point out to you that at the beginning of the modern era, the 16th century, religion in no way was involved in waking people up to the awe and wonder and grace of nature. It's so interesting to me that in the entire Reformation battles that were fought, literally and intellectually, I have not really seen one argument between Protestants and Catholics, for example, about creation. Both ignored it. They were so busy fighting over who's saved and who isn't. That is, what human is saved and what human isn't. So listen to these words from John Calvin, who, in addition to being a Protestant reformer who helped launch modern religion, was also, of course, one of the important spokespersons for modern capitalism. He says, no matter where we look, high or low, we can see only a curse all creatures, embracing the earth and the sky, utter horrible despair. And he says, if God had formed us of the stuff of the sun or the stars, or if God had created any other celestial matter out of which humans could have been made, then we might have said that our beginning was honorable. But when someone is made of clay, who pays any attention to him? So who are we? We are all made of mud. And this mud is not just on the hem of our gown, or on the sole of our boots, or in our shoes. We are full of it. We are nothing but mud and filth, both inside and outside. Now, if that wouldn't drive a whole civilization to drink, I don't know what would. I mean it. This is religion. First of all, I think he's putting a very bad trip on mud. Where would we be without mud? We wouldn't have any vegetables or flowers. But of course, he's Swiss, and the Swiss are kind of into cleanliness, But, it's just stunning how down modern religion was. And now try to get a hint of what Native Americans felt when this kind of thought hit them in the face, or your own native Celtic ancestors, putting down mud, putting down nature. But notice, though, in this passage, as full of shadow as it is, there is also the hint of the way out. John Calvin himself says, if God has formed us of the stuff of the sun or the stars. Hey, John, today's science tells us we are literally formed of the stuff of the sun and the stars. We carry the same atoms, the same elements as the sun and the stars, and we have inherited the same kinship beginning with the original fireball 14 billion years ago. So look, folks, with today's science, even John Calvin is going to get a smile on his face. He promised us he would. You see, cosmology has a capacity to help us start over. And that's what we have to do, folks, today. We have to start over. And this is what the young are telling us. They're not buying. They don't understand all the intricacies of what they're missing, but they know they're missing something. They know they're missing the food for their souls. It's not coming through religion. It's not coming through their education. It's not coming through the media. The nearest expression of it is probably, of course, and always has been, through the arts. But even the arts are compromised very often. Now, one thing that's very exciting for those of us who still feel connected to the Christian tradition is that the latest scholarship on Jesus has come to an absolute consensus that the historical Jesus comes from the wisdom tradition of Israel. Now, I've been saying this for over 30 years, and now the scholars have caught up. I'm glad they're here, on board. What is the wisdom tradition of Israel? It is the nature, mysticism, the creation spiritual tradition of Israel. Many scholars are saying Jesus was considered illegitimate, so he wasn't allowed in the synagogue on Sabbath. So while others were praying in church or the synagogue in a building, he was out in nature praying. He was building a life of awe and wonder by his interaction with the beauty and the wonder of nature. And of course, this shows in so much of his teaching, so much of his language. But that's not all. Today's scholars are also agreeing that the earliest Christians saw the Christ, it's not the same thing as historical Jesus, but the Christ as the mystical embodiment of the divine presence in nature. So the first chapter of John, they said Christ is a light in all beings. That takes Christ out of just Jesus. Puts Christ in every one of you, and in every galaxy, and every star, and every rainforest, and every polar bear, and every chimpanzee and every whale, all of which are being crucified all over again in our time. This is the cosmic Christ. And how basic was that to the earliest Christians? Here's one scholar, John Dominic Crossan, in his recent book on Paul, says, does Paul think that only mystics can be Christians? That all Christians must be mystics? In a word, yes. You cannot be a Christian without being a mystic, according to Paul. Well, that would shut down just about 99% of our seminaries, Protestant and Catholic, overnight. Now, Paul is the first Christian theologian, and indeed the first writer in the Christian Bible, because he wrote before the Gospels. Paul is a mystic. He thinks mystically, says Crossan, writes mystically, teaches mystically, and lives mystically, and he expects other Christians to do likewise. So the mystical experience of the cosmic Christ in nature ought to have a powerful influence today in being able to ground our movements of sustainability, our movements of finding alternative energy, our movements of living more simply. Now, I've already alluded to the importance of interfaith in our time, of course. But the Dalai Lama has a tremendous comment on interfaith, very practical. He says, the number one obstacle to interfaith is a bad relationship with one's own faith tradition. And I propose that by far, I'd say 95% of those who call themselves Christians on this planet today have a bad relationship with their own faith tradition because they don't even know about the cosmic Christ tradition. They don't know about their wisdom tradition that fed Jesus, a nature-based mysticism. That was also, of course, prophetic because wisdom is a friend of the prophets, as the Jewish scriptures tell us. And of course, Jesus was very much in the prophetic tradition as well. Bruce Chilton, another very respected biblical scholar today, says, no Christian thinker before or since Paul has thought on so cosmic a scale, linking God's Spirit to humanity's and both to the transformation of the world. The picture he conveyed of what it meant for even small groups of believers to meet together involved them in a literal reshaping of the universe. The range of Paul's thinking was literally cosmic and metacosmic. Whoa, I don't have a clue what metacosmic means. It's big. Because the viscera of Christ, the mind of Christ, wove all things into the primordial whole that had been their source. So the rediscovery of the cosmic Christ has the capacity to absolutely implode this tired thing called Christianity. It is time we kick the ecclesial cadaver to see if there's any life in there yet. And that's why I went to Wittenberg to pound 95 Theses on the door when Mr. Ratzinger made himself Pope. Had to do something. But the point I'm making here is that while all the traditions have the theme of the sacredness of creation, we Westerners do not have to jump east to find it. What we have to do is to get to know our own tradition better and clean it up. Furthermore, we will not even be able to enter into the shared wisdom with other traditions if we don't know our own tradition better. And of course, the Celtic Christianity never forsook the cosmic Christ until, of course, it fell into a complete sin, redemption, guilt, shame, religion, which began happening a few centuries ago. But the point is that every place you go in Celtic Christianity, the cosmic Christ is honored, including, of course, in what you've done with the cross, the rising sun and the resurrection that is implicated in the cross. So I can't. The older I get and the more I study our own sources in the West, I realize that there is a treasure here. There is a power that has not begun to be unleashed in light of today's ecological crisis and of today's cosmology. But there is energy here, and of course this is what we need as a species. Now I'm not saying Christianity is the only door in which this can happen. No. Every tradition has to dig today and find their true meaning. And we can be naive and think, oh, Buddhism's in such great shape. Well, it's not. Not in the East, it's not. I have a friend, I've done some public dialogues with her. She's not a Dalai Lama, she's a Lama. And she's American. She's actually raised Jewish, but she's fluent in Tibet. She's been practicing serious Buddhism for over 24 years, and she was ordained a Lama 2 summers ago. I was there for the ceremony. She went to Taiwan this year, and she was on TV being interviewed. And after the program, the switchboard went crazy, and they made her stay 2 more weeks. She was on television and radio constantly for 2 weeks. Why? Because the Buddhists in Taiwan were all becoming westernized. They were giving up their Buddhism. And here this American shows up telling them what a wonderful tradition we have, i.e. in Buddhism, and they're just amazed. So, and I've been told by Japanese people that Buddhism is more alive in North America today than it is in Japan. So this sleepfulness is common to humans wherever we go. Now, for me then, awe is the beginning of wisdom, but I also break down awe to stand for ancestral wisdom education. And I've emphasized the wisdom because I do believe the agenda of our universities for 300 years has been knowledge. Well, knowledge certainly has its place. By itself, it is very, very dangerous. There's a Celtic saying, I've been told, you may know better than I've quoted it, I hope I'm right, other places I quote it, never give a loaded gun to a young man who's not first learned to dance. Knowledge is a loaded gun. Knowledge is a loaded gun. Thomas Berry says 95% of the destruction on the planet today is happening at the hands of people with PhDs. That's a loaded gun. That shows that education is really part of the problem and not yet the solution. And that's because we've had this knowledge-based education instead of a wisdom-based. What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Wisdom brings heart and mind together. Wisdom permeates all the chakras. It also brings moral outrage, our third chakra, into the picture. It doesn't pretend that everything is lovey-dovey objective. Wisdom is also feminine. All around the world, wisdom is a she, including in the Bible. And of course, an educational system that is thoroughly committed to patriarchy has banished wisdom out of necessity. It's scared to death of wisdom. What is it that the Taliban, the Vatican, and Pat Robinson all have in common? You know and I know. Fear of women. Fear of the feminine. Wisdom's not going to come that way, folks. Control. Control comes that way, not wisdom. And this is where interfaith is so important, because in exploring the wisdom of the various spiritual traditions, we unleash something. Now, ancestral wisdom education. Think of your ancestors, your Celtic ancestors, your Druid ancestors. Surely this time in Irish history, when so many have floated away from Mother Church, there is a hunger to go deeper for your spiritual roots. And rightly so, of course, rightly so. The Irish people, like all people, but especially Celtic people, are very spiritual people. And while you may have felt betrayed by an institutional version of religion in a certain historical moment, that doesn't mean, of course, that you're not seeking for a return to the source, a connection to the source. So the ancestral quest is on, and especially for the Irish, and especially for the young Irish. And that's a very positive thing. But let's not be deceived. Of course, me too, what I was talking about, the real origins of Christianity and the cosmic Christ and the historical Jesus as wisdom, that's part of our ancestral heritage, at least for many in the West too. But our ancestors are not just the two-legged ones. This word ancestor means much more than just our tribal roots. For me, ancestor, another word for ancestor is cosmology. The supernova is our ancestor that gave birth to this solar system and the planets in it and the sun and the elements of our bodies, absolutely. And the original fireball that gave birth to all that and so forth, they are our ancestors too. We have 14 billion years of ancestors. So in my latest book, which is on education, is called The Awe Project, you see. And this is what I'm talking about, awe, ancestral wisdom, education. And now I want to turn specifically to education. Of course, what I'm really saying is you've got to begin education with awe. And that's a practical thing. For example, if you're teaching mathematics, what's awesome about mathematics? What brings your heart into mathematics as well as your head? What's awesome about biology? What's awesome about studying the body and physiology? Or what's awesome about religion, if that's your field? We have to bring awe into the classroom again, because it's all that awakens the heart and the longing and the mind. It's like Yeats said, education is not filling a pail, it's lighting a fire. Awe lights the fire. We're wired for awe. We're set up for awe, just like we're set up for mystical experiences. But of course, Western culture of the last 300 years deadened all of that. And in fact, mysticism, as Theodore Roosevelt has said, mysticism was held up for ridicule as the worst offense against science and reason during the Enlightenment era. So not only was mysticism in the closet, it was ridiculed if it dared to come out. Well, this is why the Irish, the Celts, had to swallow so much, just like the native people had to swallow so much in these past centuries, and you are carrying a lot of grief. Of course, we all are today, but especially those cultures that really had a living cosmology and didn't have to think about the cosmic Christ, but were praying it in an obvious way on a regular basis. You had that stuffed down inside you, while Augustine was taught in your ear to prattle on about whether you're saved or not, whether you're going to hell or not. Questions that are not even biblical questions, as Christopher Stendhal has pointed out. Not even biblical questions. In Eastern Christianity, which of course the Celts preferred to Western theology, in Eastern Christianity, the word for salvation is theosis, to divinize the universe. Well, that sounds a little more fun and challenging than just staying out of hell. Why don't we try it sometime, divinizing the universe? Now, I want to talk about, the way I talk about education is in terms of the 10 C's, to balance the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, and computers. Computers are reading, writing, arithmetic. That's one thing, and that's fine. We got to learn those things. But I think there are 10 C's that are missing from education today, and if we bring these 10 C's back, we will have a healthy learning experience, and we'll have healthy young people, not only healthy, but eager to contribute and eager to be generous. And those 10 C's, one is cosmology, and I've been talking about that. That's our place in the universe, and it arouses awe. Another is contemplation or meditation, our capacity to be still. You know, Maria Montessori, in her teaching, has a practice in which her teachers take 10 minutes a day for the kids to make silence. Now, making silence does not mean telling the kids to shut up. That's not what it's about. It's about exploring that part of the human brain that can make silence happen. It's like how we began tonight with that chant. We made silence. And it was palpable, wasn't it? I felt it in the room. It's real. Humans can make silence. That's very interesting. To our educational system, that's total news. But it is so important. Why? Because this is how you calm the reptilian brain. We all know that we have three brains. The reptilian, 440 million years old in all of us. The oldest, most dominant brain. The second, the mammal brain, half as old, 210 million years old. And then this very recent intellectual creative brain. I am convinced of this, that the reptilian brain is what is destroying the planet. And it has its incarnation in a certain individuals I won't name, such as Dick Cheney and a few people like that. But the point is that the reptilian brain is out of control. How do you calm the reptilian brain? Because a reptile is action-reaction. So someone bombs your skyscraper and kills 3,600 people, and then you go to a war and you kill about 40,000 people. More of your own people, in fact, that were killed in the original thing, and you say this is rational. This is what humans should be doing on this planet. And you put 2 million people into refugee situations and all that. It's beyond the irrational. What's going on here? The reptilian brain's going on here. Action, reaction. If you've ever wrestled with a crocodile, you know it's a win-lose proposition. They aren't real good at mediation and compromise, those reptiles. But this I know about reptiles. They love to lie alone in the sun. They love solitude. That means they're monks. The word monk comes from the word solitude, monos. There's a monk inside every one of us, and it relates to that crocodile brain. And if you want to learn how to calm the reptilian brain and teach it to the next generation, then you got to learn to meditate. You got to learn to find silence, to make silence, and to be at home in solitude. I believe Buddha's genius was that he put a leash on the reptilian brain. But not just Buddha. Every spiritual practice that does its job is befriending the reptilian brain. Nice crocodile, nice crocodile. Why do we want to do that? So that the mammal brain can come to the fore. And what's so special about the mammal brain? Check it out. In both Hebrew and Arabic, the word for compassion comes from the word for womb. The womb people are the mammals. And the womb people bring compassion in a special way to this planet. And this is why every spiritual teacher I've ever studied, Buddha, Jesus, Isaiah, Lao Tzu, Bhagavad Gita, they all praise compassion. They all praise compassion. They're here to tell us that we're capable of compassion. This mammal brain has been grossly underdeveloped in the human. But this is where kinship happens. This is where family, in the broadest sense and the most intimate sense, happens with that mammal brain. But for the mammal brain to assert itself, the reptilian brain has to find some peace. Then there is that last brain, our intellectual creative brain. So powerful. So powerful that if you're a mother in the literal sense, you have suffered because the human head is too big for the birth canal, and it hurts coming into this world. And I don't think that hurt of labor pain is about sin. I think it is a wake-up call to parents. You're bringing something very powerful into the world when you're bringing a human into the world. This human brain can do amazing things, amazingly beautiful and amazingly destructive. So watch out. And I think that we've been far too lackadaisical about what's really at stake here. That the intellectual creative brain, which is such a recent brain on this planet, and so powerful, that if it's connected to the reptilian brain, we are on our way out as a species. And that's where we are today as a species. If we can decouple it from the reptilian brain and connect it to the mammal brain, hey, we've got a chance. Because we can use all that creativity and all that to find the answers to our energy problems, to our problems of violence, and our problems of conflict. So I'd like to share with you now a brief rap video made by a friend of mine, Professor Pitt, he calls himself. Pitt is a 31-year-old African-American, grew up in the ghetto in Milwaukee. When he was 10, he was saved by Kung Fu. He had a Kung Fu teacher who taught him to calm his reptilian brain through a spiritual practice called Kung Fu. Then he found Tai Chi teachers, Qi Kung teachers, and this made him different. And he and I have been hooking up now to start a program for kids, after school, inner city kids. I believe education is good when the kids who are most near the brink of extinction, if you will. The very ones who are dropping out, the very ones who are going to jail because education is totally failing them. And this is not just an American problem. I was in England talking about this the other day. It's really happening in England too. So we're determined, what I try to do is to boil down what I learned for 29 years in this alternative program with adults. Many are graduates here tonight, some are graduates. To boil it down for teenagers. Because I think education is not being done correctly at this time in history. I agree with the Dalai Lama. It's in crisis the world over. So Pitt has taken my ideas in this book, The Awe Project, 10 of them, the 10 C's, and put each one to a 4-minute rap video. But I want you to see just this one, which is on meditation or contemplation. Just because I believe what Pitt is doing is putting these important lessons into today's language. And that is so important because the young people today have a new language. And all our systems are ignoring it. Except, of course, the capitalist salesmen who are helping to sell the iPods and all this. But the point is that it hasn't begun to permeate how we could be redoing education today. But I think Pitt is an example. Hear him out here. You might want, if we can turn the other lights, it'd probably be good.
What up, y'all? It's the P-I-double-T Professor, that is. And yo, I know sometimes your mind is just like a raging ocean that just won't calm down. But check the technique, and I'll show you how. 'Cause this style is meditation. So just breathe. Just breathe. This song is meditation. Release the frustration. Breathe deep into your Dante and dissolve the tension. Your body's mostly water, so see it as the ocean. Parts of you that resist relaxation are just glaciers, blocks of ice, melt them. Focus on your breath, ignore discomfort, or pinpoint points of discomfort and breathe into them. In this meditation, your physical shell mirrors a mountain, meaning you're not moving even the slightest inch. This is where the road, or rather the rite of passage that proclaims you the ancient warrior, warlord, triumphant one. Is patience for whatever ain't itching itches. Like everything in life is impermanent. What's impermanence? Impermanent, like the ring of a bell, loud but still resonant, swells into nothingness, meaning it's fading away as soon as you're feeling it, unless you're holding on to it. So just breathe, let it go. All the stress, just breathe, let it go. All the stress, and just breathe. 'Cause this is meditation, y'all. Just breathe. Make sure your posture is straight. Bones resting on your bones. Relax, count your breath. And just breathe. Just breathe. This song is meditation. Release the frustration. Breathe deep into your Dante and dissolve the tension. Your body's mostly water, so see it as the ocean. Parts of you that resist relaxation are just glaciers, blocks of ice, melt them. Focus on your breath, ignore discomfort, or pinpoint points of discomfort and breathe into them. In this meditation, your physical shell mirrors a mountain, meaning you're not moving even the slightest inch. This is where the road, or rather the rite of passage that proclaims you the ancient warrior, warlord, triumphant one is patience for whatever aches and itches. Like everything in life, it's impermanent. What's impermanent? Impermanent like the ring of a bell, loud still, the resonance swells into nothingness, meaning it's fading away the second you're feeling it, unless you're holding on to it. So all that stress, let it go in one breath. Come on, y'all, just breathe. What? Just breathe. Just breathe. Let the stress go. Just breathe. Let the stress go. Breathe, cause it's meditation, y'all.
When we're talking about meditation or contemplation, what we're really talking about, I think, is calming the reptilian brain. We all have this ancient reptilian brain in us, 420 million years old. And like a reptile, like a crocodile, it wants to grab and seize, and it's a win-lose brain. But you got to calm that brain so that our other brain, the mammal brain, which is about kinship and compassion and mothering, everything mammals are about, so the mammal brain can assert itself. And the mammal brain in us is about half as old as the reptilian brain, about 220 million years old. And then we've got this third brain, the intellectual, creative brain, which is brand new. It's only 100,000 years old. So if we can calm the reptilian brain, then the mammal brain, which is the brain of compassion and family and tribe, can assert itself more. And that's what meditation does. It calms the reptilian brain. Buddha's genius was putting a leash on the reptilian brain. Nice crocodile, nice crocodile. That's what you do with meditation and contemplation. Befriending that old reptilian brain. And how do I know this? Because reptiles love to be alone and lie in the sun alone. That's what crocodiles love to do. Snakes love to do it. And that's what meditation does. It teaches you to get along with solitude, to be alone, and not have to always be part of a group or a tribe. And it's this dimension of aloneness that is created when you learn to meditate. And with that, there's a calmness, there's a calming. And it's that calmness that we're missing as a species today. This happens in meditation.
I've shown this in a lot of different kinds of places, and we got a letter a month or so ago from a woman in Manhattan, and she said, I teach in the toughest school in New York City. And she said, I showed this piece, and the kids were quiet for the first time I've ever experienced that. And I showed it in Idaho, which is the whitest state in America, and this woman came up, she said, my kids listen to rap, and I can't stand the lyrics. She said, but I can hardly wait to take this home, because these lyrics are saying something. So what I get from watching this, I get many things. One thing I get is hope. The realization there's a whole new language out there, folks, for telling important things. And as I say, Pitt, this DVD he's done is actually inside the cover of the flap of my book. But he's taken all 10 C's and putting them to songs like this and video. So he's taking some substantive spiritual teaching and putting it into today's language. And that's so wonderful. For one thing, it's a relief to us older ones to know, hey, this is a kid's language, they can run with it. But of course, it's our job to pass on what's substantive. Let me just name the other 10 C's, and then I'll just talk about one, and then we'll move on. But I mentioned cosmology. This is contemplation or meditation. Creativity. I want to back up and talk about that a little more. Community, compassion, courage, character and chakra development, ceremony and celebration and ritual, and critical consciousness, critical thinking. Those are the 10 C's. And I just want to talk about one more, but it also, of course, is embodied here, and that is creativity. This is the key, folks. These three, cosmology, contemplation, creativity. I don't know if I mentioned chaos, too. Chaos is very important, especially for kids. There's a lot of chaos in the world today, folks. There's going to be more, not less, as global warming heats up. We got to learn to live with chaos. And I am convinced this is the real origin of fundamentalism and fascism, whether it be of the Vatican kind, or the biblical kind, or the Muslim kind, or the Jewish kind. There's fundamentalism all around the world today. Why? Because of chaos, folks. I'm convinced. I've worked with one of the scientists who came up with the chaos theory in the 1960s. I've done some workshops together. He wrote a wonderful book called Chaos, Gaia, and Eros. And his whole thesis is this, that chaos, of course, was a goddess in the ancient times. And she was honored as a goddess. Then when patriarchy took over, all the myths shifted, and instead of honoring chaos and integrating it into our life and society, we beat up on chaos, and Marduk went around killing Tiamat. And all these male figures, and then St. George went around killing the dragon. And he believes that first religion, and then later in the 17th century, science took over from religion and said, we're the objective ones, we'll conquer chaos and control it. And of course, all heresy in theology is, of course, a sign of chaos, which is where the hyper-Orthodox come down so strong. But lo and behold, in the 1960s, science itself rediscovered chaos and learned through computers, actually, that weather systems, that all of nature carries chaos and embeds it, and chaos is a prelude, of course, to new birth. And we were doing a dialogue together this past year, and a woman came up after. She said, I'm very shy and I didn't talk, but I'll tell you, she said, I'm a midwife. She said to me, nothing's more chaotic than birth. It's a mess. Well, that totally confirms what I'm saying, that patriarchy thinks it's its job to control the goddess chaos at all costs. That's why control becomes the god in a fascist or fundamentalist system of any kind whatsoever. It's universal. So the answer to fundamentalism is, of course, to recognize the role of chaos, and it's a positive role, and every artist knows about chaos. Art itself, creativity itself, I think, is a recycling of chaos. It's a taking of loose ends, broken ends, wounded ends, and in some way finding a meaning behind it all. So creativity is this is how we honor the young. Now what Pitt and I are going to be doing in our school, after school program, which in fact the school has already said they want to accredit for us as a course, we're going to be, the key to it is the creativity. Kids are going to be making raps and videos like this around substantive issues like the new cosmology, like ecology, like the wonders of their body, like great teachers like Howard Thurman and others. They will sit down and make film and rap around these subjects. And we are certain that in the process of being creative and learning the skill of making film and rap, but also having decent substantive teaching about topics that are worth doing a rap and movie about, that the kids are going to teach themselves. Pitt says to make a 3-minute video takes at least 30 hours. So for 30 hours, these kids are going to be listening to themselves teach about cosmology, or teach about the wonders of the body, or teach about Howard Thurman, and in the process, they're going to be learning. I think this, folks, is how we honor the young people, by recognizing how creative they are, and especially at this time in history, because there are all these new languages. You know, you can buy a camera today for $500 and become your own Hollywood producer. It's a complete end run around the system. And kids are rapping all over this world today. And this is why we're convinced, see, rap began in the ghetto. This is where this education revolution is going to begin. From the inside, inner city out. And I think it could move very fast because education is in such a crisis today. And I also believe that the Celts, the Irish, have a profound, I don't believe this, I know, a profound teaching about creativity and a profound commitment to it. And you too have been repressed in terms of integrating it as fully as it should be into what we call education. Here's John O'Donoghue. He says, for the Celtic way of seeing the world, the soul is a place where their imagination lives. The soul is a place where the imagination lives. Well, think about it. If our imaginations are no longer living, if they're not encouraged to live in school or in church, then we don't have soul. And that's why they're drinking and drugging and killing themselves. Because addiction, my friends, is a soul issue ultimately. Where imagination is stifled, the soul dies. That's good Celtic teaching. And believe me, if you think creativity is at the heart of Western education at this time in history, we're living on very different planets. In my country, this law passed a few years ago, No Child Left Behind, is all about exams, 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 and more exams. I was lecturing in Napa, city of Napa, a few months ago. A woman came up, she said, I'm a teacher, I'm a great teacher, I love teaching, and I'm quitting. And every good teacher I know is quitting. Because we don't feel it's our job as teachers just to be preparing kids for exams. Our job is to bring alive the life and the creativity in the kids, and there's no room for it in today's driven educational system. So, finally, I'd like to share one other point with you, and then we'll open this up for discussion. And that is the role of ritual. Because really, you talk about creativity and art, I consider ritual to be the art of arts. Because true ritual brings together the creativity of the tribe, the creativity of the community. It's not about something canned that one person knows how to do and the rest of us kneel and do what we're told about. No. The word liturgy in Greek means the work of the people, not the work of a canned system. So, you know, when the Pope fired me about 10 years ago, I did an Aikido move and became an Episcopal priest, an Anglican priest, for one reason and one reason only. Not because I'm enamored of Anglicanism, although I will give them some credit for orthopraxis, because at least they ordain women and admit they ordain gay people. And they have women bishops, so I'll give them credit for that. But the point is that the reason I did this is that I finished my book on the reinvention of work right when the Pope was firing me. It was pretty well timed, actually. I had to reinvent my work. But the last chapter is on reinventing ritual, because I really do believe that ritual is a shortcut for humans to get moving, to wake up, to come out of ignorance, ignoring, and denial, and to become empowered. And of course, as Melodome Some teaches, the African spiritual teacher, there is no community without ritual, he says. So community is one of those 10 C's. If we're serious about community, and we certainly should be today, community at many levels, we've got to be serious again about ritual. But not, I wouldn't say serious, I say playful. We've got to be imaginative again about ritual. And it happened that 5 young Anglicans from Sheffield, England, flew out to California, well, actually to Washington, Seattle, where I was doing a workshop at that time. And they told me about how they were taking rave, which is, is all-night dancing to go into trance. And they had brought it into the liturgy in the Anglican Church. And I thought, now this is something. This is just what I was writing about in my book. Real ritual has to include the body. And it's got to include imagination. So I flew to Sheffield to see what they were doing, and I was very impressed, etc., etc. Make a long story short, that's where I became an Anglican, and I went to the Episcopal bishop, since the Pope didn't need me anymore, that was obvious. And I said, I want to do this, but only to work with young people to reinvent ritual, and he said, go for it. So we've been creating what we call the Cosmic Mass, or now just, the Cosmic Mass, or Techno-Cosmic Mass, for 9 years. We've done over, I think, 90 of them now. many in Oakland, but in other cities as well. And we've been training others to do them around North America. And to be perfectly honest, I would love nothing more than Dubliners to get hold of this. I think it would be really exciting to be doing this in Ireland, because you people would get it, what it's about. So what happened last year, Canadian television came and filmed our Mass, and they created this 14-minute piece that they showed on Canadian television. And I want to show it to you so you get a feeling for what we're about, because you must understand, you know, that ritual is part of education. All Indigenous people know this. And it's been left out. And that's why we don't get a picture of the whole. We don't think cosmologically, because we've been told that learning is about just your eyes and pages, lots of pages. And no, ritual is a perfectly organic way to learn. And it's delightful, it's joyful, it's also serious and deep. A lot of healings, a lot of grief work. We always do grief work in our ritual, and so forth. But I want to share this with you then. This is the piece done in the Cosmic Mass a year ago.
And you bring me joy.
In the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit.
The forms in which we're doing worship are deadly. They have us praying from the neck up. They have us reading books, getting the text right, getting the musical note right. Eyes on a page are not the way to really open the heart up. I've often said, you know, if you want to do a good deed in a church, you just sneak in Saturday night with screwdrivers, remove those benches, and give people an opportunity to dance the next morning on Sunday, and you would have your awakening.
Is this man a brilliant theologian or a heretic? In 1987, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict, cited Matthew Fox's work as dangerous and deviant.
We are living through the most corrupt time in the Catholic Church since the Borgias, and the press is afraid to talk about it.
Fox was officially silenced by the Vatican, and in 1993, he was expelled from the Dominican order. At that time, Matthew Fox had been a priest in good standing for over 25 years and was the most read Catholic theologian in North America. After his expulsion, Fox joined the Episcopal Church and turned his efforts to the reinvention of ritual in worship. And this is Fox's idea of worship. The year that Matthew Fox was expelled, he went to England to witness his first rave mass. Fox saw young people using technology in the service of worship and ritual, and he returned home to North America, inspired to do the same.
The essence of rave is dancing, celebrating, community, music, and using technology for this purpose. We borrowed some of the basic ideas, and then we developed it in a more American way. Instead of calling it the planetary mass, we called it the technocosmic mass.
The theology that informs the cosmic mass is the creation spiritual tradition, which is at the heart of Matthew Fox's work.
Creative spirituality begins with the theology of original blessing instead of original sin. You came into the world as a real expression of divinity and as something beautiful and yearning to connect with others and including with the Creator. The Cosmic Christ theology is also a big part of our Cosmic Mass. It teaches that the Christ, that is the image of God, is present in every being in the universe. This allows you a much broader canvas in which to paint your worship.
2005 was an important year in the history of the Cosmic Mass. The University of Creation Spirituality, located in Oakland, California, invited students from all over North America to learn how to create a cosmic mass in their own communities.
It's really thrilling to see so many of you, and already I've heard that the energy is very high and deep. I really feel that this whole intensive represents a whole new moment in the history of the cosmic mass, training a new generation, people like yourselves, so that you can take it back to your communities.
The richness of this needs to be spread, and if I can be a channel or an opportunity to help that happen, I'm very willing.
We need to do something to renew worship, to renew liturgy, to make it more meaningful.
Continuing the nonviolent revolution of recreating ritual and work and education is what we're about.
The training is built around the 4 paths of creation spirituality.
We found that when you deconstruct the traditional liturgy of the West, lo and behold, you end up with the 4 paths of creation spirituality. The Via Positiva, which is a path of celebration and wonder and awe, delight and joy. The Via Negativa, which is a path of darkness and silence and letting go and grieving. And the Via Creativa, which is a path of creativity. And finally, the Via Transformativa, the path of social justice and compassion. And it is this structure of creation spirituality, the 4 paths, that is the backbone structure to all of our cosmic masses. The 4 paths of creation spirituality really assist us in deepening the worship experience.
Matthew Fox speaks of the Cosmic Mass as worship for a postmodern world. It's a ritual that combines technology with pre-modern forms of prayer like dance and chanting.
And that's one of the most important things we're doing. We're taking the computer cyberspace revolution into sacred space and time. I see the images that we're capable of producing to be like the 12th century revolution of stained glass windows. Today, they're like dancing stained glass windows.
Each Cosmic Mass is created around a specific theme. Over the last decade, the community has celebrated dozens of different masses, the Kabbalah, the Goddess, and Celtic wisdom, to name a few.
We try to choose themes that are universal in the sense that they affect the archetypes of the human consciousness and human communities.
The students will create a Mass entitled Holy Inebriation, Drinking from the Source.
So you're seeing it pretty empty right now, obviously, which is the way you'll walk into any venue that you're going to do a production in.
As Melodon Misomi, the African spirits teacher, says, there is no community without ritual. We have to make living again our rituals. And that's what the Cosmic Mass is about. To try to invigorate community again.
And I know you've been getting a lot of information over the last 24 hours. How long have you been doing this?
Several blocks from the University of Creation Spirituality campus is the historic Sweets Ballroom, which has been the home of the Cosmic Mass for many years.
Want it down. Okay.
Late on Sunday afternoon, the preparations are almost complete, and the first people begin to arrive.
What brought me here is a quest for more understanding of spirituality.
To me, it's the science of inducing or supporting people in a transformational experience.
I expect a lot of surprises.
Magic. That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
And more the merrier.
Yeah, if you want to stand here, go ahead.
should be an entrance into the mysteries of life, including the mysteries of joy and wonder and beauty and awe, but also the mysteries of grief and suffering and forgiveness and pain. All those mysteries we try to usher people into in our cosmic masses.
May I greet you with water?
Thank you. We don't realize how primal ritual is for our species. For tens of thousands of years, ritual was the primary educational moment for young people and for others in the community. The story we're celebrating is the story of how human beings got here, the 14 billion year story of creation.
Stand in front of you, take the force of the blow, protection.
And remember, we're all here to pray, no matter what your tradition is. I know there are Buddhists here tonight. I know that there are pagans here tonight. I know there are Jewish people tonight. I know there are Christian people tonight. We want you to be at ease. When I'm finished with this simple welcome, we'll have the 4 directions to open the sacred space in a formal way.
Evamastu swaha. Evamastu swaha. And allow your breath to invoke the power and presence of the spirits and guardians of the north and bring that energy down through your body, allowing your breath to take the roots down into the earth and to open you to the magnificence and the beauty of all of the gifts of Gaia, our beloved home.
The baseline pressure.
The first part of the Mass which is celebrated is the Via Positiva. This is the experience of awe, wonder, and gratitude.
The beginning of the Mass is about beauty everywhere. This is a great work of opening the soul up.
And you bring me love.
We're all hungry for ritual today. When you look out at people dancing in all these ages and all these interpretations of the music, it's just a forest of beauty. What can come out of this except something good?
And listen to the sorrow or the emptiness, the sadness, whatever it is that you need to let go of.
The community is then transitioned into the Via Negativa, the experience of darkness and grieving.
Let that pain out.
Many times when people have attended the Mass, they've told me afterwards, well, they love this, they love that. But the thing that most hits them is the Via Negativa. Our Cosmic Mass always includes a grieving dimension. Until we grieve, we're blocked up. You have to create a safe space where people can let their stuff out.
Communion is celebrated during the Via Creativa.
The word liturgy comes from the Greek for work of the people. If it's one thing a Cosmic Mass is, it is work of the people.
So in eating this bread and drinking this drink, let us call on the glory of the divine, the goddess immanent in all things, the Buddha nature, the cosmic Christ.
Bodies ferment in these barrels.
I think worship is an effort to bring the community together to honor our existence and not take it for granted.
Is our own blood.
The Mass concludes with the Via Transformativa, the celebration of justice and compassion.
Being a mystic is not enough. You also have to take that energy into service, into the community. And so the prophet needs strong worship and ritual to feed his or her soul. Let's face the real issues of our time, which are about the extinction of all the other species and the way we're doing away with this precious nest that is our home. Let's do it in artistic, aesthetic context, the ritual is, because you get empowered to do something about it. And that's where stirring up the community to empower it to be a prophetic community, all that can happen and has to happen in ritual.
That's what a religious experience should be like.
The inclusion of so many cultures, the inclusion of so many spirits, Native American and right up to modern times,
You know, I've done a lot of worship experiences. I've been in Indian ashrams, I've gone to temples, I've gone to Catholic masses, and, everything, and this was like it.
So, you can have the lights again, thank you. So let me just close then my remarks and then we'll have some discussion. I began talking, of course, about the crisis we face as a species, how this is really going to call forth the spirituality of the 21st century. It's going to be a spirituality of interfaith, truly Catholic, therefore, and universal. And it's going to be about wisdom. And it has to ignite the imaginations of the young. Spirituality is not carried by the old. I was just visiting one of your great monasteries today, and the monastic tradition was about drawing the next generation in and apprenticing them and so forth, apprenticing them into the wisdom of the tribe. And it's not about just the old ones being at home with our prayer books or no prayer book or what have you. It is about igniting a fire, as Yeats said. And I don't think anyone could accuse our educational systems or our religious systems today of being particularly adept at lighting that fire. But it can happen very fast. It can happen very fast. We have new languages today by which to light the fire. We need a new alliance of young and old, what I call intergenerational wisdom. That is what we need, and it is right. It's right in our grasp. Let me close with a statement, a sentence from Derek Walcott. Derek Walcott won the Nobel Prize for Poetry in 1992. He's a Caribbean poet. And in his acceptance speech, he said this one sentence. He said, "The fate of poetry is to fall in love with the world in spite of history." I love that line. The fate of poetry is to fall in love with the world in spite of history. History is not pretty today. Have you noticed? Every headline. It's not pretty. Humans are doing bad things to themselves, to other humans, and to other beings on this planet. But the fate of poetry is built into all art, not just poetry, the fate of ritual, the fate of music, the fate of organizing, of reinventing education, of reinventing all the forms, because that's creativity. It's about form, reinventing forms. The fate of reinvention is to fall in love with the world in spite of history. The one thing that's holding our species back is our inability to fall in love. The biophilia that I spoke of earlier. And of course, the medievals had a word for that inability. They called it acedia. A capital sin of acedia. We've mistranslated it as sloth. It's much more than that. It includes depression. It includes cynicism. It includes boredom. It includes addictions. And so prevalent is it today in our culture that we've invented a new word for it, couch potatoitis. Couch potatoitis is acedia. And Thomas Aquinas asks, what is the cure to acedia? And he says, zeal comes. Zeal is the opposite of acedia. Zeal is the medicine. Zeal comes from an intense experience of the beauty of things. The solution to acedia is falling in love. Not just with a two-legged mate, which is an anthropocentric reductionism on falling in love. But falling in love with being, falling in love with existence, falling in love with whales and fishes and trees and flowers and poets and musicians and people different from yourself. Falling in love with the diversity of God's beautiful vocation. Vocation. I meant vocation. Freudian slip. Vocation and vocation. That's our cure. And there's not one of us that is not capable of not only falling, but falling daily and bringing the young along and reinventing education and religion and everything else that has to be reinvented today. The fate of this reinvention is to fall in love with the world in spite of history.